Bonjour. I'm going to do the presentation in English because I'm lazy and I've already done it in English at a different conference. So I'm Igor Lovitch. I'm a technical chapter leader at Société Générale, and I would like to share our experience with the Axon framework that we had over the past 3 years. So first, a bit of background, right? What is the business? So the department that I work at, we develop solutions for the Société Générale Global Financing Division. And to oversimplify things, if you need a loan to build a boat, to lease airplanes, or to build a road, right, you would turn to them. We have about 4,000 users worldwide. There are different populations. There are bankers, back office, front office, client coverage team, risk officers. It's an activity which is highly regulated. The auditor, the regulator could always ask for proof. And it's mostly user-facing applications. So back in 2015, we were in a situation we had a number of legacy applications which were hard to change. They were hard to deliver, hard to test, long delivery cycles. Everyone knows these kind of problems, right? So we set out some goals, is to create a single platform which will hide the IT complexity from the users. They would no longer need to connect to different applications to perform their daily tasks, right? We also would like to be more agile. We'd like to deliver more value more frequently. In order to be able to do that, we need to be able to deliver with zero downtime. Whereas before, an application would be delivered every 4 or 5 months. Now we had to deliver at the end of a sprint. And the focus on APIs. Right, so the domain was fairly complex. We decided to address that using DDD. There was auditing requirements, as-of requirements. We decided to try event sourcing. So if you do event sourcing, you kind of have to do CQRS as well. So doing a search on Google, CQRS, we're a Java workshop, so Java. Event sourcing, Axon popped up. We took a look at it, and we decided to try it out for one of our microservices. So where we are after 2 years, I should have updated, it's probably 3 years now. We have about 25 microservices in production. 3 of them use Axon. We have 3-week sprints. Some services are delivered on demand, most at the end of the sprint. So in terms of Axon, what have been some of the benefits that we have seen? Right? So these are in no particular order. Security is easier because it's never easy. It's a CQRS, right? So your commands come, there's a single point of entry into your domain, which is your command bus. Axon provides interceptors on the command bus, which allows you to validate permissions, visibility on the business objects underneath. Right? So no longer will you forget your Spring security annotation on the method. Everything goes through one point of entry. So events are everywhere, and typically in the microservice architecture, we integrate through messages. So since you already have events inside your microservice, you can expose them to the outside world, right? We found out that we had to copy we could not expose the internal events to the outside world because otherwise it would require other applications to couple to the Axon events, which have their own special format, their own way to structure metadata. So there was some effort involved in exposing the events to the outside world. It does promote loose coupling because inside your microservice, you're integrating through events. So adding new functionality is adding another event listener, right? So if you want to send an email, you add an event listener. If you want to create a new read model, you add another event listener. So it avoids having code which is tightly coupled. I feel it promotes good DDD practices. So the slippery slope, you know, it slopes the right way. If you find yourself fighting the framework, it's probably because you're doing something wrong. So in terms of not forcing you, but encouraging you to have rich domain models, right? Since your command handlers are on your aggregates, the easiest way to put your logic is inside your aggregates, right, and not outside, because that's where the data lives. So it is a framework, a negative for some, a positive for others. So it does impose a certain conformity, and when you're working on teams which are spread across multiple continents, it is a positive. The annotations which are present in the code, they do help document it. There are plugins for IntelliJ, for example, which allow you to navigate the annotations. So you could go from the command handlers to all the event handlers, handling the events which are issued from the same command. So it simplifies deployment in certain cases. Specifically, we try to be, for the most part, to do trunk-based development with feature toggles. In a relational database, when you deploy a new version, you would have to migrate your schema, as well as migrating your code. When you're doing event sourcing, your schema changes, right? It's actually code changes, so it's a bit easier to toggle. Testing is another interesting aspect. In an event-sourced world, you don't really care about the state of your aggregate. You can treat it as a black box. What's interesting is the behavior, and the behavior is defined by the command that comes in and what are the events that are produced. So Axon provides what they call fixtures, which is a given when expect, so given when then kind of flow. So given a sequence of events, which gives you the state, when a new command arrives, what are the expected events? So it changes your mindset a bit. It focuses, it makes you think, not in terms of data and what kind of data will change, but what is the behavior of my system? So some odds and ends. The documentation is actually quite good, which is good. The user community is quite active. The guy who wrote the framework, Allard, he participates quite actively as well. Another thing which was a kind of positive surprise was the copying of business objects. Sometimes when you have a problem in production and you want to be able to replicate it in a non-production environment using the same data, if you have a relational model, copying a single business object into a different environment is quite complex. Now it's just a series of rows in your event store, which are easy to copy. So there have been some lessons learned, of course, and sometimes the hard way. So there is a learning curve, right? It's something you have to learn. You do have to read the documentation. It's very easy to get started, but to really understand how it works, you have to learn, right? There's no way around it. So not just documentation, pair programming, all these good things help out, but you have to learn. A point about skills. A lot of our business analysts, historically, they had experience with relational databases. So whenever they had to do analysis, they would be able to query the data present in those databases. So they had experience with SQL. Now we had an event store, which is serialized events in Oracle, and we stored projections in Elasticsearch. So querying the event store, not very useful. Querying Elasticsearch requires acquiring new skill sets, right? So again, you need to learn. So long-term solution is the data lake, which will contain all the data, queryable, etc. But for now, sometimes the business analysts are able to do their own queries. Sometimes they ask help for developers. To write some scripts in JavaScript and run them against Elasticsearch. Something which was unexpected. So in CQRS, you separate your query in your command. So we had them running as separate processes. In our service registry, they would show up as two separate services, right? And so you're leaking your abstraction. You're telling the outside world, like the outside world doesn't really care that you have to call this service to modify and this service to read, right? So we didn't really have a good solution for that. In terms of events, something which we learned at a cost, keep them small, right? And keep them business oriented. If you find yourself having something saved event and it starts to resemble kind of a CRUD application, maybe event sourcing is not the best option for you. The reason for that is that, don't forget, you're saving all these events in your event store and they're going to live there forever, right? So you'll have to maintain, so your application is going to change, the business requirements are going to change. The bigger your events, the more chances are that you'll need to change them. So, which will require writing code, which will require maintenance, higher cost. So, tooling and the event store. So we stored our event store in Oracle. There's really no tooling to go along with that. So in theory, your event store is immutable. Once it's written, you don't touch it. If something happens and you want to correct it, you apply compensating events. In practice, if there's a production problem that needs to be resolved now, you're going to do a SQL update, or you're going to open your SQL developer, you're going to open your serialized event, and you're going to modify a 5 to a 6, right? Which is bad, but that's the reality of things. But there are really no tools which allow you to automate this, to audit this, so you kind of have to roll your own. Something you need to worry about, right? So once you have distributed, right, you have an event bus which is distributed, you need to start worrying about idempotence, right? What is the underlying technology for your event bus? If it's RabbitMQ, which we used, it provides at least one semantics. It makes no guarantees that your message will not be delivered multiple times. One approach is you can, along with your events, you can transfer state and not just the change. That helps in some cases. It doesn't help in other cases. So let's say you have an event listener which fired off an email. What happens if it fires off an email again? Is that a problem? So it's something you need to think about it, and there are no magical solutions. Race conditions, again, distributed systems. If you have one command which fires off n events, you don't know which instance of your service is going to handle those events. So typically you have multiple replicas for resilience. You need to worry about that. Is it important to you? For us, the way we handled it is we made sure that the events were mutually exclusive, and we used Elasticsearch mechanism to merge updates to different parts of the document. Can I still read my event store? After your system has been in production for a couple of years, right, and it's full of events, your application has evolved, your events have changed. Are you sure you can deserialize the event that has been written to your event store a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago? So at least our answer for that was continuous integration. So whenever a build happens, there's a batch which kicks off, which rereads the event store with the current version of the application. For us, it's feasible because, again, if you think back to the business I was talking about, we have the transactions are big, but the volume is low. So we don't really have a huge number of events in our event store. After 3 years, it's about 300,000 or 400,000. There are companies which have billions of events, so it might take some time to reread them all. And the biggest lesson is keep it simple. So this framework, it provides a number of building blocks which allow you to build your system, right? You can start simple, synchronous, non-distributed, right? So one of the mistakes we made early on is that we said, hey, this is fun, lots of toys, right? Let's take everything distributed, make everything asynchronous, put caches everywhere, without actually measuring whether we needed that or not. So it makes for a system which is very fast, probably faster than you need, scalable, more scalable than you need, but it's a cost, right? When you make things asynchronous, it's harder to test, it's harder to debug. So start simple and add complexity only when it's justified. And that's about it. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. everyone's hungry.
Bonjour, enfin hello, it's in English or in French?
Comme vous voulez.
En français, d'accord. Donc je ne suis pas du tout habitué à la programmation par événement, donc je vais poser peut-être une question bête. Mais en fait, c'est une question par rapport à l'event store. C'est quelque chose sur lequel des processus peuvent être utilisés pour exploiter les données existantes, c'est bien ça? Et est-ce que vous avez été confronté à des cas où il fallait migrer certains événements existants vers un autre format, étant donné parce que de nouvelles données ont dû amener à ce qu'il faille changer un même événement entre avant et après?
Donc, oui, c'est une question assez courante. Les systèmes évoluent, les besoins évoluent et donc les événements évoluent aussi. Donc, Axon, donc il y a deux solutions possibles. Il y a une solution où on dit, en fait, il y a différents cas. Quand on ajoute des choses, d'accord, en général, il n'y a pas trop de problèmes. C'est plus un problème quand on change quelque chose d'existant. Si vous, par exemple, les renommer en champ, ça c'est un problème parce qu'on n'arrivera plus à désérialiser l'objet. Donc on a deux options. Soit il y a une option sale, c'est exécuter une requête sur l'event store si on a les moyens et modifier l'event store. Axon propose plutôt une solution propre. C'est un mécanisme qui s'appelle des appcasters. Ce sont des bouts de code qui permettent de mapper les versions serialisées de version N-1 vers la nouvelle version. Et donc on a une chaîne des appcasters qui permet de relire la totalité de l'event store.
D'accord. Merci.
Bonjour, juste une petite question, est-ce que Axon vient avec des connecteurs basés sur du Kafka?
La réponse est non. Après, rien n'empêche d'en écrire. Ils ont pris une autre, en fait, donc nous on utilise la version 2.4 qui, voilà, l'implémentation de l'event store qui était fournie, il y en avait deux. Il y a une implémentation qui, c'est juste pour faire des tests, qui écrit juste dans les fichiers, sur le file system. Et il y a une autre, non, il y a trois implémentations. Une autre qui écrit dans Oracle, et une autre, ou dans une base GDBC, et une autre qui écrit dans Mongo. D'accord? Avec Axon 3, ils ont plutôt tendance, en fait, je pense qu'ils vont sortir un produit bientôt où ils sortent leur propre event store pour brancher dessus. Mais après, c'est une interface, donc rien n'empêche d'implémenter.
Dans quel cas, en fait, dans la présentation, en fait, c'était précisé que l'event store est censé être immutable. Dans quel cas, en fait, on peut le modifier? En réalité, en fait, pourquoi on doit le modifier?
Les théories, jamais. En pratique, comme je dis, ça dépend des... On peut être très catégorique et dire on ne le change jamais. C'est append only. Donc s'il y a modification à apporter, il faut insérer de nouveaux événements. Mais des fois, il y a des bugs qui... voilà, donc soit il faut développer, soit... Des fois, c'est compliqué. Et quand il y a l'impression que c'est un incident de prod, il faut résoudre. Des fois, on reste souple. Merci beaucoup. Bon appétit.